Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, episode 34. We have Corina in the show today. Real quick, we'll be talking about the improv scene in Canada, Alberta, Edmonton, and some of the comedy stuff that's happening. And as Corina's request, she is the wonderful, bespectacled Corina. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, thank you.
Life is treating you well on this Thursday, Friday show?
Yeah, no, it's doing real good. And I'm feeling a little sleepy, but then I had some coffee and now I'm feeling slightly less sleepy.
The good old McDonald's, right?
It's the best coffee.
It is.
I feel very aggressively confident that it's the best fast coffee that you can have.
That's great. I was once a Second Cup fan, and then I got sober, and now French press Italian coffee only. I will not go to any store unless it's Remedy here in Edmonton or Carrot Cafe. I'm plugging all like the places that nobody else can go to unless they're in this city, really, right?
Yeah.
But Carrot Cafe, Remedy, and Trans Coffee downtown, I think.
Yeah, I really used to like Transcend, and then at Nate they had like the carafes of Transcend coffee, and they were like really like. They were not very good. They were real bad. McDonald's coffee is the best coffee that you can buy in just like a general sense if you need coffee on the go.
It's definitely economic.
I also take my coffee black. So.
Well, there you go. I remember when their coffee was so bad, people used to go and get their breakfast at McDonald's and then walk over to the Tim Hortons to get the coffee there because their coffee was just horrible, maybe about 5-6 years ago, I think. But now that we've kicked off this podcast talking about coffee.
Yeah.
Right? Let's get into where I met you.
Yeah.
So I met you at the Fringe.
Yes, I hand-built you.
Yeah. Aggressively. So how was your experience this year at the Fringe?
Really, really good. Exhausting as per all Fringe years. But this year was really, really great. So we had two different shows this year at the Fringe. We brought back Thunderprov, which is our long form improv show where we sort of take a suggestion from the audience. We tell this one long story across the hour based on an audience suggestion and then kind of intersplice that story with like little bits of short form improv inspired by the long form narrative, but they're not narratively linked. So you kind of get this short form bits and long form bits. It's this like weird thunderprov lightning bolts. It's a neat fun thing. And we did really fun, good things with that at the Sewing Machine Factory. I had a lot of fun with it. I was running tech for that show. Good audience attendance. Neat new venue that hadn't really done very much in the past, from what I understand. This year, they had good attendance. There was also double booked at that venue. Another improv show called What's the Deal showed up at that venue. And Hubris sketch comedy show was also at that venue. And I think they all had great attendance. So, yeah, it was fun. And then also YGD&D, which has been at the Fringe now for 7 years. I think this was the 7th year that we put it on. And that's a Dungeons & Dragons themed improv show. And we had great attendance again. And that was over at the Grindstone Comedy Theater, which just opened up in April of this year. It was opened up by Grindstone, which is a comedy group in Edmonton. And so that went really, really well as well.
Where exactly is the Grindstone?
So it's 100th Street and 81st Avenue.
Is that? So I think I saw this new comedy place. Is that where I'm thinking it is?
Probably.
Stand-up, they're doing stand-up in there.
Yeah, so they have a stand-up set. There's like 2 stand-up shows that I think run out of there. So there's a Four Banger Friday that's run by Simon Gorsak. And that's at 9 o'clock once a month, twice a month. I can't remember if it's once a month or twice a month. It's tomorrow or today, I guess, at 9 p.m. over at the Grindstone. And there's also a once-a-month show put on by Kian, I don't remember his last name, called Telling Secrets at the Grindstone as well, which is a really neat kind of experimental stand-up show where the comedians actually tell stories as opposed to necessarily like their routine stand-up sets, which is really neat. If you run in the stand-up scene, you will hear the same jokes very often. And they actually like kind of tell stories, which is really interesting. The last one I heard had some interesting stories. One of them involving McDonald's, actually.
That's an awesome tie-in. That's great. So obviously it's a very vibrant scene in Edmonton.
Yeah, the Grindstone is like a beautiful gift, and I'm so thankful that it exists since April. That's actually where we'd run Thunderprov and YG D&D during the regular season. So it's so wonderful that it exists now.
That's excellent. I think one of the things that I had noticed in your Instagram was your show was selling out a couple times. I also went in and got to see it. I was very, very much blown away. So I got to see your show or that particular show. And I also saw Punch Up while I was there. And there was another show I saw that the name is eluding me. And so originally my Fringe day started in Montreal. So that's the first Fringe I had ever seen in my life. It's basically Yuck Yucks for the most part, right? All those festivals run at the same time.
Yeah.
I've seen Toronto's.
Yep.
Edmonton's is second to Montreal. I don't know.
Well, no, I lived in Montreal. Yeah.
Okay.
For 5 years, I actually went to McGill University.
I was a Park X guy.
Yeah, the shade.
Yeah. That's where I was. So yeah, I mean, so when I see the Edmonton Fringe Festival here, I get very, very excited. I promote the hell out of it because it's a huge deal, in my opinion, that we have people like you and all of these local talents, so to say, forming with people who are coming from so many other places around Canada in order to be able to emerge in this one place and have that theatrical, artistic, vibrant feel that I've never felt in New York. I've never felt not in one essence of a place, right? So the ambiance of any Canadian who's never been to a Fringe festival is something that needs to be experienced, because I don't think you'll ever get that anywhere else in Canada.
Yeah. You'll never see that many Australians. There's just so many Australians performing on the street. They're just everywhere.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy this year. And actually, if I remember correctly, I think my first Fringe festival in Edmonton was 2005. And that year, everybody was on White Ave itself. So, for you Americans who are listening, because I know there's a lot of Californians who tune into this show, White Avenue for Edmonton is I don't know, that's the hub center, basically, of one of the hub centers, I guess, in Edmonton for our arts district, really. And you had all these, people just hanging out on the street kind of playing guitar and stuff back then. And now we're actually seeing it in the arts district just north of that area. And they're really organizing it, in my opinion, in a better way where it's all nice and tight, So I was really appreciative of that this year. And it seemed to me that they ran the shows with more leeway in between each other. I remember in 2005, it felt like everything was just jam-packed, one right after another. You couldn't get to another show if you had just bought 4 or 5 tickets for 4 or 5 different shows for that evening. And so you always felt like you were running, whereas this year, I didn't feel like that at all. So I really, really enjoyed the Fringe this year because of that. It seemed like that there was better scheduling. than I had ever seen before. And I was very, very appreciative of that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it also comes down to the fact that, like, 2005, you've got less shows to choose from. This year, there was, like, 220 or some odd shows.
Yeah.
So you've got selections.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get out of show at 3:30, you look at the times, you're like, yeah, I can pick up a show at 4 o'clock because there are 6 shows starting at 4 o'clock for me to choose from.
So how did you start off in improv? Or did you start in a different venue for arts? Or has it always been improv?
Now, see, that's kind of a weird question because I've been doing improv since like 2004. Like, I've been doing improv for a hot minute. It's been a long time for me. I've been doing it for a very, very long time. So I've been in the art scene since, like, I was in high school, since I was like a wee child.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that I've been doing improv for longer than I've ever done anything scripted. I used to audition for scripted things and never get cast, and I was like, okay, cool. So, like, you don't like me for scripted stuff? I get you. I follow what you're putting down. I will just never do that again. So I, like, eventually stopped auditioning for scripted things and just was like, that. It's also just easier to make things up on stage. I can just do that forever.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think you have to have kind of that niche or that ability to just kind of flow through, right? Like, I would definitely say this. When I saw you performing, you were one of the most talented improv people that I've seen, honestly. Like, I've seen...
Which show did you catch, by the way?
I think... So it was the Wednesday night show. Or maybe Thursday.
Because was it like the D&D show or the Thunderprov show?
I think it was... Actually, it was the Thunderprov show I saw.
Yeah, because I would have been doing the tech for that. I would have been hiding that behind the scenes, so you wouldn't have seen me on stage.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think
you would have seen me, like, flicking on the lights and things like that, but not on stage.
I think the show itself, though, from what I had seen from other improv shows, was one of the better shows that I had seen. Like, my exposure to, as we had talked before the show, Chimprov or Rapid Fire Theater and Dynasty, those, like you were saying, the long and short form of it, I really enjoyed because it wasn't that long form of a stretch of a story, right? Like Dynasty is, where you almost have to come back the next week and the next week and the next week because it was a long running soap opera. So I really actually liked that show for that purpose. I thought I had seen you on stage, though.
No, I mean, there are some, like, other, like, women type people who look similar to me. You might be confusing me with, like, Glenna Showalter. We have, like, similar body types, and she's a very, very funny, very, very witty person. Okay. So you might be confusing her for me.
Yeah.
And I think she performed on the Wednesday night. So you might be thinking of her. But yeah, no, I'd be very flattered if you did think that I was Glenna Showalter.
That's okay.
Yeah, she's fantastic, very, very funny, very witty improviser, oftentimes really great at, like, tying different threads of a story together. That's often where, like, her improv thrives. Also really great at, like, tying in obscure references to, like, Roman Catholic literature and things like that.
As we're sitting in a Roman Catholic hall.
Yeah.
That's great. What came first, Thunderprov for you or the D&D?
So when I joined the company back in 2015, 2016, somewhere in that range, I was originally a Thunderprov player. Thunderprov was actually a totally different beast back then. It was, like, actually experimental, so it was totally different formats. Like, every time we jumped on stage, it was the baby of, like, Richie Panis, who's no longer with the company. He was the original president of the company. So that's what we used to do with it. And then the format as it stands right now was developed by Michael Johnson, who was the former director of the actual show format and was the director for this run of Fringe. So, like, a lot of what you saw up on stage, while as the artistic director, I helped guide the vision of the company and like help to morph it. The actual format itself was developed by Michael Johnson, who's actually a player with Rapid Fire.
Oh, okay.
And he could be continuing on with them. But he developed it and sort of like made it his baby and like came up with like the way it all flows together and really helped hone it. So like a lot of what you saw at Fringe was a lot of his guidance and why it worked so well. So yeah, it was what happened there. Thunderprov for me came first, but YGD&D as a format came like way before. Like the company itself was built off of YGD&D at Fringe. Like Dungeons and Dragons Improvised came first at Fringe for as a company. Then the company was built off of that. And then kind of morphed along from there. And then the format itself, it's currently being directed by Lena Anderson, who's fantastic, great at it, has been working to refine and develop it. And I think we've basically got it down to as close to like a refined art as you can get. Like we're the only show in town that I'm aware of that has improvised stage combat. And it's just like a fantastic spectacle that it's always joyous to be a part of on stage. And yeah, I had so much fun with my character this year, of this villainous, like awful, evil person that I managed to get people to cheer for me regardless. It was just a delight to be the villain this year for Fringe.
Do you find without the script for improv that, as you had expressed, that it was easier, but do you find it gives you more of that mind juice? You know what I mean? Like when you're done a set of improv, your mind is still kind of like fluttering.
Yeah, no, that's probably fair. And also in the same way, like years later. Mm-hmm. Right? Like not just like after the moment, right? So you'll like after the moment of the scene, you can find yourself still like revisiting and reflecting after the show, revisiting, reflecting. So much so that we often have to debrief. Like we can't help but debrief after a show. Yeah. We actually have we have this implemented policy where we don't do notes after shows. We actually used to do notes. Like we'd sit and like rehash everything to the point where me being like, I'm a very critical person, to a detrimental degree as a director, and it's like something I'm hyper aware of. So I've tried to rein it in for the sake of my players, because while I want everyone to get better, I also don't want everyone to leave every single show feeling like they've done terribly. So what we've done is we kind of pulled back on the notes. And set that aside for like rehearsals and workshops and that kind of stuff. But instead, what we do is we do something called one good thing. It's actually two good things now. And so afterwards, we get together as a group, and you have to say your two favorite things about what happened on stage. One thing just generally about the show, and then your favorite thing that you did on stage as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it lets you have like a moment of reflection about the show, just in general. Like my favorite thing was like when Jess did this really cool thing on the keyboard and they played this awesome like song or whatever. Or it lets you do your own personal reflection on what you did on stage as well.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's very important to keep that positive flow going. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't have much experience on stage in that capacity, but I know after performing musically, one can really, beat themselves up pretty bad, because what I tended to do is I would focus on the negative as opposed to the one note or the thing that I did correctly. And, I think in the team capacity, that really helps because you almost can encourage each other in that moment. Whereas being a solo act on the stage is a little trickier in that regard. Let me ask you this though: have you done stand-up? Because I know a lot of people who've segued from improv to stand-up. So I feel like that's a loaded question for you.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I always joke that I hate stand-up comedians. No, I often joke that I loathe them. But no, I don't actually hate stand-up comedians. Maybe. No, there's quite a few people in our troupe that do stand up, and they're fantastically funny people like Liam Creswick and David Ray. And I think they're the only two people who do it regularly. And if I'm forgetting someone, I'm sorry. We actually had a group night. So we do like group nights, for instance, and we all went out to like a stand-up comedy night, and some people tried their hand at it, and they were all fantastically funny. The people who got up on stage and tried it for the first time, of course they were. Yeah. I would never do that because I'm a fragile little butterfly, and I would, like, my ego would never handle people not actually laughing at something that I put pen to paper at. Because the nice thing about improv is, like, when you get up on stage, the audience is going to forgive you if you're not actually funny, right? Because you're making it up. Yeah. So if you're not actually funny, and the big rule with improv as well is that, like, if you try to be funny, you're going to inevitably not be funny. Yeah. Because you're going to be stressing about being funny, and then the whole thing's going to kind of just fall to shit. So what you should be focusing on is, like, the joy of playing connection with your scene partner and listening and saying yes and advancing the story and all of those kind of wonderful, playful things. Like the joy of play, really, is what it is. Don't focus on finding jokes. Focus on finding the game, right? Yeah. But with stand-up comedy, it's, you better make me laugh, you motherfucker. Yeah. Like, what are you doing?
I just paid money.
I want to laugh. Yeah. Or alternatively, why is this guy telling jokes while I'm eating wings? Like those are your two options with stand-up comedy. Like for me, I'm a delicate little flower, and I want people to love me. So I don't know that I ever would have the fortitude to actually get up on stage and bare my soul like that. So I don't know that would ever be something that I would actually put myself out there for.
So D&D improv. Mm-hmm. Do you play D&D?
I do, yeah.
So is that almost a prerequisite for?
Absolutely not. No, I am. I had only like briefly played like pickup games once or twice before I actually did the D&D, YG D&D, the improv show before So no. And there's people who did YG D&D without ever playing D&D before. You don't need to know anything about D&D to do YG D&D. We have guests who come onto the show who don't know anything about it.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
And it still fits.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, because it's the thing about improv is that you just need to know how to say yes and, right? So if somebody says, I cast ants in your pants, as an improviser, you're like, yeah, got it. I understand what ants in your pants, the spell means. It means that I have ants in my pants. Yeah. Is that a real D&D spell? No, but it's okay. We understand what you mean, and we can have fun and play with that.
For right now, it is.
Yeah. Because it's fun, and the audience will forgive you.
Did you get any negative backlash handing out handbills at Fringe? Were they off put? As you were doing that?
I mean, nah. I mean, most people are just like, no, thank you. And you're like, yeah, sure, got it. Most people don't get off. But the weirdest thing I had, so like, I don't know, did you see my costume is precious this year?
I kind of remember it. I think it was that purple dress thing.
It was like a pink dress, like, picture like a cupcake anthropomorphized as a little girl with pink brown pigtails, like a pink tiara and like pouty lips. So there was some weirdness with that costume, like a little bit of weirdness, like a lot of weirdness. Dudes are gross.
I bet.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy that I'm older now and I'm not like adolescent, teenage kid.
No, adolescent boys are fine. They were totally chill. The older men were gross.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you hit 65 and it just got weird.
The rules don't exist anymore. I guess, for
Yeah,
them.
it got weirder the older the men get.
That's scary.
I know, right?
That's scary. Did you see any of them actually come to the show though?
No, which meant that all the effort that I went through to hand film them was for nothing.
Oh my, that's a travesty.
It really is. It really is.
So back to when you started. Let's go there. When you started improv, what was that like? First time walking out on the stage.
Boy. So like the first time I ever did improv would have been like French immersion improv in sixth grade with Madame Conlin.
Oh yeah.
Remember my sixth grade French teacher? We did not get along. I had a problem with authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like a French like referee style. But like if I remember,
I remember that though.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I remember that when I was in school, improvisation.
Yeah.
Right, and then they would have they were trying to do like the whole "whose line is it anyways" thing, and they would like whistle like it was theater sports, right? Yeah.
I vaguely it's in there somewhere, locked in my brain organ. Anyways, so that's my first experience with improv. But if you like fast forward into high school, when I was like actually put on the improv team, so it wasn't. I don't remember being necessarily nervous or anything like that, because it was more like a finally moment. Because I remember having auditioned in the 9th grade and not being cast and being so mad about it. I have always been a perfectionist, and so the fact that I wasn't cast that year felt like I was so angry, because the person that they did put on the team didn't even show up. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, I deserve this so much more than they do.
The one time that you were actually going to follow authority and show up for the rules.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh, I deserve this so much more than they do. Sorry, Shauna. I resented you so much.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so when I was actually put on the team, I was like, yes, I'm so pumped. I'm going to be in every scene all of the time. Everybody needs to pay attention to me. That's not exactly what I was thinking. But it was more like, if I'm not in all the scenes, they will fail. And I carried that like forever. I still carry that like a little bit, which is a problem that I have with my improv, is being a little bulldozery. But yeah, it's a work in progress.
Let me ask you, when you were talking about being on stage and just kind of like being there, right? That almost what you were describing almost reminded me of the starting of a meditation.
Yeah.
Trying to calm yourself down, right?
Yeah.
So do you visualize in your mind what it's like to be on stage in front of bigger crowds as the crowds get bigger? Or have you ever gone there or did any of those kinds of exercises to, be comfortable?
Nah, not really. So for me, like one of the neat things that I've always found really interesting about improv, I'm really a big fan of like the metaphors drawn between improv and Taoism.
Okay.
Yeah, like the water metaphors, I'm a big fan of those. I think they're really interesting because they're so counterintuitive to like who I am as a person, because I'm so bullheaded. I'm just very much like there's a brick wall and I'm going to push against it and be very confused as to why my arms hurt all the time. Whereas like if you I don't know if you've ever read the like Tao Te Ching or anything like that.
No.
I'd recommend it. Very good read. But it's all about sort of flow and not being necessarily resistant to flow, and there's also some like metaphors in it that I'm not a huge fan of, but like the water metaphor, big fan of. But essentially,
So how is the water metaphor?
So like water being the most powerful force in the universe, being the most flexible thing in the world, but also the most powerful thing because it can essentially wear down a mountain.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So being the most flexible thing, it'll fill up any sort of crevice, move through anything, while also being like so powerful as to bring down literally anything in the entire world. Right? And improv also sort of occupying the same kind of mental space, right? You have to be so flexible with improv. Yeah. You have to be willing to change your concepts and your ideas and your preconceptions. You come into a scene and you offer up an invisible object and you think it's a dog or whatever it is. And you say, here is this thing. And then the other person says, aha, yes, well, thank you so much for this chicken. You can't keep emphasizing that this thing that you handed them without specifying that it was a dog is a dog if they've said thank you for the chicken.
Yeah.
Because then you're negating what they've said.
Yeah.
But in the same time, there is so much power to be had between the connections that you can have on stage. And a part of what we try to do with the improv, what I'm trying to help connect with our improv that we do with Sorry Not Sorry is it's a part of our mandate is to tell genuine stories through the use of improv. It's not just to make people laugh. Like, that's not enough for me. I've been doing improv, like I said, since 2004. Yeah. Making people laugh is great, but telling stories is really part of what we do. Like in our finale for YG D&D for this year's Fringe, we had people like crying in the audience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was like very, very touching. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So like part of the finale for YG D&D, so we had for YG D&D, we had this group of adventurers going on a quest together. So there was Dukes the Duke Caliban, who was this Durgar bard. So a Durgar is like a deep dwarf, right?
Okay.
Who lives underground from the undercommon. He was kind of like a bluesy jazz musician, if you kind of think of him that way. Yeah, he was very fun. I kind of talk like this. It was very fun. And then we had Wayward Jenny, the ginger harpy. She was a sailor. She had kind of like a bit of an Irish lilt-to-her voice. She kind of sounded like this, but honestly, I can't do her voice. I had to do her voice at one point in the story, and it was not very good. I'll elaborate on that in a second. And then there was Sloane, who was a half-elf monk who followed the way of the drunken master, who turned out to never have actually been drunk the whole time, which was very interesting. And had been sort of faking it the whole time to put on kind of an air, sort of like if you've ever actually seen any drunken master stereotype, they oftentimes are faking it. And my character, Princess Precious, who was kind of leading them all, who was a little girl who was possessed by a demon, as you do. Anyways, so what happened sort of was Princess Precious was trying to find a new body for her demon to inhabit. That was sort of the storyline.
Okay.
That we discovered together. And at one point, she found this phylactery, and she swapped bodies with Jenny.
Okay.
And then at one point, while Jenny's soul was inside the body of the little girl, she swapped bodies with Sloane. So the Sloane's soul was in Princess Precious's body, and Sloane's soul was in Jenny's body. And then Jenny died, basically.
So it's basically character shifting.
Yeah, so we were all playing each other's characters.
Yeah.
And Sloane died while in Jenny's body.
That's a no-no in improv, right?
Not in D&D, because it's a Dungeons and Dragons game. People die.
And they come back.
Sometimes, but not always.
Okay.
Right? Just like in D&D, you actually have to do a resurrection. Right? Like there's a whole thing to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And And for the purposes of our game, we also add stakes to it, like a real story, right?
Okay.
So we have these big 20-sided dice that we have the audience roll, right?
Oh, okay.
And so if it's a success, then yes. If it's a failure, then no.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
So we actually leave it up to chance.
Oh, wow.
So there's it's kind of almost like a wrestling match. When you go to see one of the shows, the audience gets really ramped up on those rolls, like cheering, screaming. We had the audience chanting for numbers at one point, like chanting in sync for a 17 roll, because the dice had been rolling a 17 at consistently for one of the shows, and they chanted 17, 17.
I almost feel like it's group gambling, like
almost.
You're waiting for the craps to go.
Almost.
Snake eyes, baby.
Yeah, you almost, right? And we do stage combat on stage 2 at the same time, right? So it's a real spectacle, right?
That's excellent.
So at one point, Sloane died while in Jenny's body. And then Jenny had swapped back bodies with Precious. So basically, what happened was Jenny, while in Sloane's body, decided to swap back into her old body and basically sacrificed herself to save her best friend's life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they had a big final sort of showdown with the demon and killed her.
That's awesome.
And it was very emotional.
It sounds like it would have been very
And keep in mind, this is a story we'd been telling for 8 shows up until this point. Right?
Wow.
That was the finale.
So were you getting repeats?
Yeah, there are people who had come to sort of every show at that point. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We actually had some fringe goers. I had spoken to them after the first show. I had handmailed them and they came to the show. And they were like, you know what? When you came to me and told me about the show, we actually came to see the show because we thought it was going to be really bad. And we came to heckle you. And then we saw the show and we liked it so much that we needed to see the rest of the show.
Thank God they were honest though, right?
Yeah.
That takes a lot of guts too, to be honest. We were coming in to heckle you. Because that's even an art form in itself, I think. I've seen good hecklers. I've seen some shitty hecklers. But to know that somebody had enough guts or enough balls to be like, hey, I came here to kind of fuck up your show, but really it impressed the hell out of me, and I'm coming back to the next one, right? I think that's a huge compliment even for your own, just for you of what you're doing in that moment, right?
Yeah. Part of what I want to do with the company, and it's part of what I think we do, is working towards telling genuine stories that transcend just necessarily just comedy, right? And that touch on things that speak to truth. Excellent.
So now that the Fringe is gone, what's your next season of scheduling coming up? Is that
the
close?
22nd? Yeah. So we start Thunderprov up on the 22nd, and then we alternate back and forth between the 2 shows. We might be even having more shows potentially. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, but we do have a couple shows other than Thunderprov and YGD&D that I'm hoping to look to explore again in the new year. So we have a couple of smaller sort of troupe-based formats that I'm hoping will make some appearances at the Grindstone as well. But yes, Saturdays at 7 at the Grindstone. Basically Thunderprov on the 22nd of September at 7, and then YGD&D, and then we kind of hop back and forth between each of those.
That's excellent. So between those 2 shows, over your time of being in improv, what are some of the skills that you've learned from improv that you utilize in your daily life?
I know I can shut down people really fast. I used to work with kids, and I always used to really laugh when kids used to think that they'd be able to outwit me. No. No, small child, you cannot. No, I guess just the the ability to think quickly. I don't know. I guess confidence to talk on stage, public speaking. I did like convocation this year for Nate where I read people's names off and they chose me for that because I do improv, which that's neither here nor there. Turns out you can't say people's names better than other people because you do improv. I don't know how to pronounce people's names better than other people.
This is why I left your last name.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't going there. And I was just like, I wish I could.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to plug it right now,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's just Drancidovicius.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, there's only 6 syllables. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah, no, I'm so easy to stalk. It's ridiculous.
You're probably the only one.
Yeah, it's the only family in the world.
Yeah.
Just Google me, and it's just me and my brother and my family. That's it. It's just us.
So when it comes to improv, what were the clear, definitive lines that you had learned as a skill through practicing improv that enabled you to be a better performer on stage, like throughout the time?
Like mad eye contact. Yeah, like uncomfortable eye contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably one. You want to make eye contact with people, because that's how you connect with people on stage.
Yeah.
If you're not making eye contact with somebody, you're not connecting with them.
That's true for podcasting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. I would say listening skills, specifically like repeating what's being said. So when somebody says something, repeating it. So active listening and then also repeating back what they said, like paraphrasing it, is also good. You might sound like a little bit repetitive, but it's okay because it means that you know what they said.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these were clear, definitive lines that you like skills that you had adapted to on stage that kept you on top of the game? And did they come all at once or did it take you a while to learn them?
They're like ones that I like adapted because I felt like they were like really clear ones that kept me engaged to what I was doing. And then like those are like the 2 biggies that kept me like really involved in the moment. And then, the other one I would probably err on the side of like, the other one's like kind of like a character work based one. Okay. I find I like doing like finding motivations for my characters that are like filter based. And that sounds like a weird thing to say. Often my characters tend to be really based in archetypes. So all of the characters that I build for myself, even if they're like in the moment or if they're like ones that I like plan a little bit beforehand, tend to have like filters over them. So like my motivation is like, I want to see my mom. So how does every single decision that I make in this scene pass through this like filter of I want to see my mom, right? So how does like picking up this box filter through, and how can I pick up this box in a way that like filters through that, and I like let everything kind of just like pass through that filter to build through that kind of character.
Awesome.
And that's kind of how I build my characters. So oftentimes people will say like, oh, you build like really interesting and unique and dynamic characters. And I literally just take, like when I build my characters, they're often like based off something like really stupid and simple. Like I listened to this song and I liked this song. What kind of character motivation would this song have? And then that's how I build my character. And I just like do that on stage until it makes a character. Like last year I had a character based on Marilyn Monroe named Dinky. Yeah, she was a barbarian. She was very fun. I kind of missed her. And she was just a barrel full of laughs. And she just made lots and lots of really inappropriate jokes. But like basically, she was like they set up a joke, and I just made the joke every single time. So all they had to do was like say something vaguely sexual, and I'd be like, "I'm here for that," and then that was it.
Here comes the pitch.
Yeah, and so she was a ton of fun, and that's basically how I like build all my characters.
I think the thing that I appreciate out of that the most is it really gave an insight of how your thinking is coming together for your character. So I thank you for that very much, because I don't think a lot of people are really open in that context where they're willing to be vulnerable enough to be like, this is how I think and I put this together. I've met a couple people who are like, yeah, we're not talking about that. And the reason why we're not talking about that is because I don't want people to know how I think. And I'm like, is it really that much of a sport to you where they just don't want people in their head that way, right?
That's very strange to me. Sometimes I just don't have the words. That's all. You can know how I think. I'm sorry if it doesn't make any sense. That's all.
And I think, well, when I had first heard that, I was like, really, this thing is that much? That's why I had a difficult time. So you and I, prior to the show, you were like, oh, I'm going to be the first person from the arts world on the show, which is for sure true, because I haven't been able to book anybody else. Because as soon as we start talking about characters, just in the pre-question show where we're having coffee or whatever, they're like, no, I don't think I want to do this with you. And I'm like, why? And they say, because I don't want people to know how I think. Because that's me when I'm up there. That's what I'm doing up there, and I'm not going there. So I appreciate that.
No.
You're like, ain't a thing.
No. It's I'm like, for me, like, okay, so as the artistic director, like, I'm constantly trying to like help give these kind of gifts to my players as well, and being like, here's how I do things. Like, and like, I can't force people to do things the way I do it, obviously, because everybody does things differently. Yeah. But like, here's like all the tools that I have in my toolbox. Like, take my tools.
Yeah, that's great.
They're here for you to use if you find them useful.
And I have never been in so again, music, but still messing around with you actors or improv people, comedians of the like.
We are,
right?
Yeah, weirdos.
In Montreal, they are more open, so they're willing to exchange. I haven't found that so much, but maybe that's because I'm coming from the music side of things as opposed to somebody who's actually in that circle, right? Mm-hmm. Would you say that you almost have to pay bones or like pay your tribute, so to say, in order to get into that circle?
Oh, I have no idea. That's an interesting question. I don't know. Maybe there are people who are like a little bit more like guarded with that and being like, yeah, take my workshop and pay for my book.
Yeah.
I don't have a workshop or a book.
Would you like to put one together? I mean, shit, we could do something here on Life on Life's Terms and definitely throw it up on YouTube.
I could do a workshop. Obviously, there's whatever. You can listen to a podcast. But if you're not actually getting up on stage and doing improv, you're never going to get very good. I mean, I have taught workshops before. I actually did a workshop at NATE a while ago. And they were, the people who did it were like, this is one of my favorite workshops I've ever done. And I was like, thank you. That's very sweet of you. I don't do workshops regularly. Here's some resources for people that you can actually pay to do an actual workshop. Here's people you can actually pay. But yeah.
So I was going to ask you if you have any workshops coming up.
Yeah, no, we don't actually do workshops because we're a small company. Like, we only have 17 players in our company.
Wow.
So we don't really do workshops, though. The amount of people who ask us if we do workshops means I probably should think about doing it. No, but if you're looking to do workshops locally for improv, obviously Rapid Fire does workshops.
Yeah,
that worth recommending. Grindstone also does workshops that I would also recommend doing.
Cool.
I know their fall term has already started, and they only offer terms like once a term, right? Because they're a small company as well. But I would recommend looking to either of those two options. They both offer good stuff.
back to the getting initiated into the tribe, so to say, of like the arts, I can definitely say that the music scene is 100% like that. If you are on stage and can't play a guitar, but you can sing, most of the people sitting around in that room are like, you can pay me for lessons and then I'll teach you how to put together a song. But we're not doing this like for funsies, because I'm here trying to make money. You know, a lot of musicians have that line that I've seen. Whereas, like I said, as I was trying to book people from the theater world to come in, they had a very, very difficult time as soon as I went into like, well, tell me how you think, basically. If I had any question along that line, they're like, we're not going there. So we've had professional fighters on the show. And a lot of those guys, you'll see right away, they get this aura about them as soon as you start talking about how they fight, where they're like, no, we're not going there because I'm not giving away any secrets when I'm in the ring. We're not doing that publicly. And that's almost what I felt from some of these theater people, where they're like, I'm not giving away any of that to like outside people, is what it felt like to me. Right? Like
I can kind of get behind like a fighter maybe, because that I can kind of get behind like people like doing like research on like if you're going to a fight and listening to like interviews and that kind of stuff. But like
theater,
you're not like that's like a weird, like the capitalists are trying to like pit artists against each other.
That's
and,
what
like
I
we're
thought.
all in this together. Like the amount of tickets I sold for shows that weren't my show at Fringe, it was a little bit ridiculous.
That was mind blowing to me this year when I saw people coming from like just 2 or 3 different handbills in their hand, handing out whatever they could hand out to people. Blew my mind away.
Yeah. Well, okay. So some people are hired to do that. I'm going to let you know that. So some people hire other people to like, just like do that. But like, I just genuinely, so when I'm out handbilling for myself, I am handbilling for our shows, straight up. But sometimes I'll talk to somebody and they're like, I can't come and see your show. I'm looking for a show at 4:00. And I'm like, hey buddy, you know what? I don't have a show at 4:00, but tell you what, I know like most of what's happening at Fringe. And I do. And I know a show that's happening at 4, and I have friends that have shows that are happening at 4. Let me pitch you their show.
That's really cool.
Right? So I'll pitch for my friends' shows, or even if I don't know a friend's show, I also like sometimes I'll have someone be like, I'm looking for a burlesque show. And I'm like, I know the burlesque shows that are happening at Fringe because I kind of know what's happening. Like I lived at Fringe for 10 days. I knew pretty much all of the shows inside and out. Like I could have made a racket for like planning people's fringes. Just been like, pay me $10 and I will plan your fringe for you. But like the amount of people that I'd be like, hey, you know what? Like, you know, you can't come see my show. Like, I'll tell you quickly about it. Here, take my handbill. Like maybe come see me on a different day. But like, here's some recommendations. Like I sold other people's shows. People who weren't even my friend shows. Yeah. Because frankly, the idea that that artists are inherently like fighting against each other because there's competition, sure, because we all want to get butts in seats. But at the end of the day, art is art. And if I can't have you come and see my show, I want you to see a show.
Well, and I think, so if I could dare to compare, so I personally work in the not-for-profit world. So being in the not-for-profit world, there's a dime a dozen of us, and we're all fighting for the same nickel, same penny, basically. And the reason for it is because we don't have a venue to distribute our services in the most applicable way. And I think that's kind of the same thing with the arts. There's not enough venues. So you basically have a week where these people are standing in front of you wanting to be entertained and pleased by theatric arts. And so because of that, it's like no holds bar. We're gunning for everything, trying to get it all. And like you said, this is I would suspect probably the most grossing period that all of the companies basically pull out, right? So it's difficult to make a living off of 2 weeks or 10 days for the year.
There's no profit in it, but it's the only time of the year that our players make money. So like the rest of the year, the money goes to like our rental spaces and stuff like that. So like, and then if you compare to like, even like really big companies like Rapid Fire and stuff, like their players, from what I understand, I don't know what their like actual money looks like. I think they don't typically get paid unless they're doing like workshops or corporate gigs outside of the year. Like their regular season shows, I don't believe that they get paid unless it's their Saturday like special shows. So like theater sports and stuff, even though theater sports is their moneymaker, they don't actually get paid for it because of the amount of people involved in theater sports, even though it makes them their money, right? So
I also heard that they're trying to build a theater for themselves.
Yeah,
right? And I think that's the tragic piece when it comes to Canada as a whole. When it comes to theater, I mean, sure, you have Montreal and you have Vancouver and you have Toronto, which have a hell of a lot of places to have venues, but the problem is it's so bloody expensive to have those venues that it's very difficult to make a go of it, so to say. Like if you lived in New York with this world, I think it's easier to eke out a $50,000-$60,000 salary life, so to say. However, you couldn't afford to live in New York with that kind of money. You know what I mean? So it's a tit for tat all the way through, right? Yeah. And it's unfortunate that we don't have more. But I think that could change if, especially with the way how the environment, as you were suggesting, is changing, where everybody is kind of pulling together, right? I can almost foresee like a mall getting closed, and then next thing you know, like maybe West Edmonton Mall would be the best.
Well, no, I mean like the Grindstone, like I kind of like looping back over to that the Grindstone space is fantastic. It is still growing, but I think it's gonna keep, like, the ball's gonna keep rolling over there. And I hope our houses keep growing. Yeah. Like if we could keep seeing like a steady growth in numbers to like fill it, like if we could, I mean, I don't know if we'd ever be able to sell out every single show, but in a beautiful, ideal world, we'd sell out every single show. And that would just like, our expenses would be in such a better place if we could sell out every single show. We'd almost be able to pay our players every single time, if that was like the case. But like, because our biggest expense right now is rehearsal space. Yeah, like that's our big thing that costs us like such a chunk of change. So,
what is it at the door for?
Oh, so like Thunderprov, like we take, so it's $8, but plus a $2 service charge from Grindstone. Okay. So it's $10 for an hour show. For YG D&D, it's $11 plus a $2 service charge at $13.
So plug it, Corina. What time does it start?
So September 22nd at 7 o'clock for Thunderprov. Okay. And then the next show after that would be the 29th for YG D&D.
I'll be there on the 22nd, and we'll definitely pump it here on the podcast. Use our Instagram powers as much as we can, and maybe Kenny and I, the co-host, will we'll throw a blog out there too.
Yeah, I think a Facebook post should be going live shortly.
Yeah,
it's gonna be real fun. The theme is the rise of the suburban phoenix.
I'm actually really stoked. So you're going to Theater Sports tomorrow, right?
I am, yeah.
I'm going to Theater Sports. So for those Yankees who are listening, Theater Sports is that rapid fire theater that we were talking about here in Edmonton, and it's the kickoff for tomorrow night. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I haven't gone in a while. I mean, I'm used to like traditional Theater Sports from like Loose Moose.
Oh, yeah.
With the like cloaks.
Yeah.
Angry judges, but
I'm looking for, this is actually, so I'm taking a date with me tomorrow night.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so on
is
yesterday.
Is it first date, second date, fourth date?
So third date.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow's the fourth date.
Pew, 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 pew,
so what we did on the third date was we went to Spence Diamonds.
That's very intense. It's too intense.
It was hilarious. So the reason...
Why did you go to Spencer Diamonds?
So,
Did you get lost?
No, it was intentional. And we showed up like slobs.
Okay.
On purpose.
Okay.
Right? And so we were standing there, and the listeners have already heard the story, but to repeat myself again, because it is pretty interesting. So we were standing there. She was just laughing hysterically because she was like, I never want to get married. But we were standing there anyways. And so the salesperson, basically I tell her, I said, I can afford $15,000. If you want a ring, I'll buy you $15,000 ring. So she's looking at all these rings. And then, of course, the most astute salesperson ever in the world, who is fake from head to toe, through and through, basically right away says, how much can you afford? Well, I'm not going to tell her 15. So I said 10,000. I can do 10,000 today. There's my date looking at rings that are $1,500 for the ring. And you can see the salesperson going, oh my God, honey, you're throwing my commission away. All over her face, right? My co-host was like, that's the one. You got to marry that one because you gave her like 15,000 and she's looking at 1,500. So here we are going on the fourth date. A little bit more relaxed.
A little more chill.
So that's at the Citadel, right? And that'll be a good show. So maybe I'll see you there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to the 7:30 or the 10.
Probably the 7:30.
I'm going to the 7:30. I like to get it done early. I think I like the first one better than the later one. I find they're tired.
Sleepy.
Yeah. Their brain juices are all done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a bachelorette party in Calgary, so.
Sounds like it's going to be a good weekend.
Yes. It'll be fun. It's a childhood friend, so.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Calgary's a fun town. You're going to Red Mile?
I don't remember. I don't know. I have the invite. I don't know where I'm going. I'm not even sure I'm going to Google Maps it.
I'm here. Come pick me up.
Yeah.
I'm on the edge of the city.
Yeah. She was like, are you going to get an Airbnb? And I was like, this was in the middle of Fringe. And I was like, honey, I don't have time to figure out any of this. I'm going to sleep in my car or I'm going to sleep on your floor. This is the amount of, you will find me the Airbnb or these are the options that I have. You will send me where I'm sleeping. That's your options.
Well, with that being said, this is our hour. It's up.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna close this up real quick. Shout out to Liam Connolly at Connolly Law for all of your Canadian law, will, estate, and media issues. Google Liam Connolly. He's an amazing lawyer, and he will hook you up for sure. Please go to our Patreon page to give us suggestions on not-for-profits. We feature a not-for-profit every 30 days, and we give them 100% of the donations that come through our Patreon account. We would also ask you to go and check out our brand new website, www.lifeonlifetermspodcast.com. We will have t-shirts out next week. One commitment of $30 will get you a Life on Life's Terms t-shirt, and you can be a Pride member by next week. Imagine that. I thank you on this Friday show. Happy Friday, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.